Have you heard people say Jesus could have sinned, but he did not? What does it mean when the Bible says Jesus was tempted in every way just as we are, yet he did not sin? Let's examine if Jesus was peccable or impeccable. There are very few verses that would slightly suggest the idea that Jesus could have sinned, but he did not. So let's examine them first before we dive deep into the subject. Let's read from Hebrews chapter 2 verse 14 onwards. Since the children have flesh and blood, Jesus too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. For surely it is not angels he helps, but Abraham's descendants. For this reason, Jesus had to be made like them, fully human in every way. I repeat, for this reason, Jesus had to be made like them, fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in the service to God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. Because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. Let me repeat. He is able to help those who are being tempted because he suffered when he was tempted. In Hebrews chapter 4, we read verse 14 onwards. Therefore, since we have a high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is not able to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us read one more verse in Matthew chapter 4, verse 1 onwards. Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. The above verses say Jesus shared in our humanity. The above verses say Jesus was made like us, fully human in every way. The above verses say Jesus himself suffered when he was tempted. The above verses say Jesus was tempted in every way just as we are. And finally, in Matthew's Gospel, we see that Jesus was tempted by the devil in the wilderness. But does that mean Jesus could have sinned? How could Jesus' temptation be real if he could not sin? Or, in other words, how could Jesus' temptation be real if he did not have sin nature? Firstly, let us define sin. According to Romans chapter 3, verse 23, sin is falling short of the glory of God. In other words, sin is falling short of the nature of God. Now we know God by nature is holy. Let us read a few verses on God's holiness. Leviticus chapter 11 verse 45 says, I am the Lord who brought you up out of Egypt to be your God. Therefore be holy because I am holy. Apostle Peter quotes the same verse in his first epistle. In Isaiah chapter 6 we read, the seraphim were calling to one another and saying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty, the whole earth is full of his glory. In Revelation chapter 4 verse 8 we read, each of the four living creatures had 6 wings and was covered with eyes all around. Even under its wings, day and night they never stopped saying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty, who was and is to come. In Isaiah chapter 43 verse 15 we read, I am the Lord, your Holy One, Israel's Creator, your King. Through these verses we know that God is perfectly holy. Sin can also be defined as lawlessness. In 1 John chapter 3 we read, everyone who sins breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness. In other words, sin is anything that breaks or transgresses the law. Now what is the law? Law is God's nature itself. For example, we know God by nature cannot transgress his law. He cannot commit murder. God by nature cannot lie. He cannot cheat. God by nature cannot commit adultery. God by nature cannot covet. So sin is falling short of the nature of God. Now let's see the definition of temptation. The Greek word used for temptation is perazo. Perazo can be used in two ways. The first is in the temptation that all of us humans are susceptible to, the temptation to sin. The second is in the sense of testing, like we see in Hebrews chapter 11, which says, by faith, when Abraham was tested or tried or tempted, offered up Isaac. The same Greek word perazo is again used here for the word tested or tried or tempted. But in this case, the testing was not to sin, but to try or test Abraham's faith. God was not tempting Abraham to sin, but he was giving an opportunity to Abraham to prove his unshakable faith in him. We will continue with this discussion in the next episode, but before that, let's summarize what we learned today. We learned that Jesus shared in our humanity. We learned that Jesus was made like us, fully human in every way. We learned that Jesus himself suffered when he was tempted. We learned that Jesus was tempted in every way just as we are. We also learned that sin is lawlessness, and God by nature cannot transgress his law. He cannot lie, he cannot cheat, he cannot commit adultery, he cannot covet. We saw that the testing of Abraham was not to sin, but to try or test Abraham's faith. Hope this study has been a blessing to you. May God bless you.